Welcome to Long Story Short. Today we are dissecting William Shakespeare's 1599 political masterpiece, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, a play that completely defined the modern understanding of betrayal and political ambition. Imagine a world where the most powerful man alive is teetering on the edge of absolute tyranny. You are his best friend, but you also deeply love your country. Do you assassinate the man you love to save the republic, or do you let him become a dictator? That is the brutal moral dilemma at the heart of this incredibly famous story. This play is not just a historical reenactment about ancient Rome. It is a brilliant psychological thriller about manipulation and mob mentality and the terrifying reality that even the most noble intentions can easily pave the way to absolute disaster and total civil war. Long story short, Julius Caesar is a scathing examination of political power and the tragic consequences of choosing rigid idealism over practical reality. It forces us to ask the uncomfortable question of whether violence is ever actually justified in the name of freedom. Let us set the scene in Rome in the year 44 BC. The Roman Republic is celebrating wildly because Julius Caesar has just returned triumphant after defeating the sons of his former political rival Pompey. The common working-class citizens absolutely adore him, but the aristocratic politicians are completely terrified. They see Caesar as a massive existential threat to their democratic system because the people treat him like a literal living god. As Caesar parades proudly through the crowded streets, a mysterious soothsayer steps out and warns him to beware the Ides of March, which is the 15th of March. Caesar arrogantly brushes the man off as a crazy dreamer, ignoring the warning and proving his massive ego will ultimately be his tragic downfall. We immediately meet our two central character foils, Cassius and Brutus. Cassius is a calculating and manipulative politician who deeply resents Caesar's godlike power. He is driven almost entirely by personal jealousy and a deep sense of inadequacy. Brutus, on the other hand, is Caesar's closest personal friend and a highly respected nobleman. Brutus is driven purely by a deep philosophical love for the Roman Republic and its ancient democratic traditions. Cassius is incredibly smart, and he knows he cannot assassinate Caesar alone because the Roman public would immediately view it as a jealous and petty murder. He desperately needs the honorable and flawless reputation of Brutus to legitimize the bloody assassination. Cassius begins a brilliant and predatory psychological manipulation of Brutus. He flatters Brutus intensely and constantly reminds him that Caesar is just a fragile, mortal man who is completely unworthy of absolute supreme power. To finally push Brutus over the psychological edge, Cassius forges fake letters from the Roman citizens begging Brutus to step up and save them from Caesar's growing tyranny. Brutus finds these fake letters planted in his room and experiences a profound internal crisis that shatters his peace of mind. He loves Caesar like a brother, but he genuinely believes that Caesar's crowning will inevitably destroy Roman freedom forever. Brutus tragically decides that Caesar must be killed preemptively, like a serpent in its egg before it can hatch and become dangerously venomous to the state. The conspirators gather at Brutus's house in the dead of night and finalize the assassination plot. Brutus immediately takes control of the group, making a massive tactical error by refusing to kill Caesar's loyal right-hand man, Mark Antony. Brutus naively believes that sparing Antony will make the assassination look like a noble religious sacrifice rather than a petty, bloody massacre. This idealistic blind spot will eventually cost Brutus everything, including his own life. On the morning of the Ides of March, the atmosphere is incredibly tense and horrifying. Caesar's wife Calpurnia has a terrifying prophetic dream where she sees Caesar's statue pouring fountains of blood while happy Romans bathe their hands in it. She begs him on her knees to stay home and avoid the capital. Caesar initially agrees to stay home to comfort her, but one of the conspirators arrives and brilliantly manipulates Caesar's massive ego. The conspirator claims the Senate plans to officially crown him king that very day, and suggests the Romans will think he is a weak coward if he stays home just because of a woman's bad dream. Caesar's blind ambition completely overrides his common sense, and he marches directly into the deadly trap. Clears throat. If William Shakespeare's complex 1599 prose feels overwhelming, and you want to truly understand the political ambition of the text, You can get the full audiobook entirely for free by starting an Audible trial with my link in the description below. Listening to the original text is the absolute best way to grasp the brilliance of this political tragedy. Now let us dive into the terrifying climax and the incredibly bloody aftermath. Caesar arrives at the Capitol building, and the conspirators immediately surround him under the fake guise of presenting a political petition. Suddenly, they draw their hidden daggers and savagely attack him from all sides. Caesar fights back bravely until he looks up and sees his beloved friend Brutus standing among the assassins with a drawn and bloody blade. Heartbroken by the ultimate betrayal, Caesar utters his famous final words, "Et tu, Brute," which translates to, "And you, Brutus." He immediately stops fighting, covers his face with his cloak, and dies tragically at the base of his former rival Pompey's statue. The conspirators then literally bathe their hands and swords in his blood, completely fulfilling Calpurnia's horrific nightmare. Brutus immediately steps out to try and pacify the screaming and terrified Roman public. Mark Antony arrives on the scene and pretends to make peace with the assassins, shaking their bloody hands one by one. Antony secretly vows total violent revenge and asks for permission to speak at Caesar's public funeral. Cassius completely objects, knowing that Antony is a dangerous and charismatic speaker, but Brutus naively agrees, thinking he can easily control the narrative by speaking to the crowd first. At the public funeral, Brutus delivers a very logical and dry philosophical speech, explaining that he loved Caesar, but he loved Rome more. The fickle crowd is initially swayed by his honor and they cheer for him. Then Mark Antony steps up to the podium and delivers one of the most masterful pieces of rhetorical manipulation in all of literary history. He starts by saying, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," and repeatedly calls Brutus an honorable man, using aggressive, dripping sarcasm to completely destroy the assassin's moral credibility. He dramatically shows the crowd Caesar's violently mutilated body and then reads a fake will claiming Caesar left his private gardens and 75 drachmas to every single Roman citizen. The crowd goes absolutely feral with grief and rage and transforms into a violent, mindless mob, burning the city and driving the terrified conspirators completely out of Rome. The final acts of the play descend into a brutal and chaotic civil war. Antony forms a new, powerful triumvirate with Caesar's cold and calculating adopted heir, Octavius, and a third man named Lepidus. They ruthlessly execute hundreds of their political enemies without a second thought. Meanwhile, Brutus and Cassius build a massive rebel army in Greece, but their once noble alliance is completely fracturing under the immense pressure. They have a massive screaming argument in their military tent, showcasing how the corrupting nature of absolute power is actively destroying their supposedly noble cause. That very night, Brutus is visited by the terrifying supernatural ghost of Julius Caesar, who coldly promises to see him at the upcoming battlefield of Philippi. This ghost perfectly symbolizes Brutus's overwhelming psychological guilt and the inescapable cosmic consequences of his violent actions. The massive armies finally clash at the brutal Battle of Philippi. Cassius makes a terrible tactical error and mistakenly believes his best friend has been captured by the advancing enemy troops. Out of pure overwhelming despair and grief, he orders his loyal servant to stab him using the exact same sword he used to brutally murder Caesar. Brutus later discovers Cassius's dead body and realizes the bloody civil war is completely lost. Facing certain capture and public humiliation back in Rome, Brutus chooses to run himself through with his own sword, committing an honorable Roman suicide rather than surrendering. When Antony and Octavius finally find Brutus's lifeless body, Antony stands over him and sincerely praises Brutus as the noblest Roman of them all. Antony acknowledges that Brutus was the only conspirator who killed Caesar for the greater good of Rome, rather than being driven by personal envy and petty spite. If you want to absolutely dominate your AP literature exam, you need to weave these specific symbols into your final essays. First, we have the violent storms and the bad omens. Throughout the play, Shakespeare heavily uses apocalyptic weather like meteor showers, raining fire, and wild lions walking the city streets to symbolize the massive disruption of the natural political order. The text suggests that when humanity murders a rightful leader, the physical, natural world violently and physically reacts to the crime. Second, you absolutely must discuss the ghost of Caesar. The ghost represents the absolute immortality of Caesar's political spirit and the crushing psychological weight of Brutus's guilty conscience. It brilliantly proves that you can physically kill a man, but you cannot ever kill his powerful ideological legacy. Finally, the pervasive symbol of blood. The literal blood represents both political guilt and the ultimate tragic sacrifice for the Roman Republic. When the assassins bathe their hands in Caesar's warm blood, they foolishly think it makes them look like noble liberators, but it actually permanently stains them as ruthless and ambitious murderers in the judging eyes of the Roman public. If you have a paper or a test coming up, watching a summary gets you the plot, but reading William Shakespeare's actual prose is where you master the material. You can grab the physical copy on Amazon or get the audiobook completely for free with an Audible trial using the links in the description below. That is the long story short. Please like and subscribe for more literature breakdowns. See you in the next one.